My name is Kristin TePas. I'm the Great Lakes Literacy and Workforce Development Specialist for Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. And I'm co-hosting this career panel with my fellow Sea Grant colleagues, Megan Gunn and Carolyn Foley. And just while we're still getting people on, I'll give you just a little brief background about Sea Grant for those of you that are not familiar. So we are part of a national federally funded program by NOAA. So the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, provides funding to coastal states and more specifically to state universities to conduct outreach, education, and fund research on coastal issues. For us with Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, our work is related to the Great Lakes and in particular Lake Michigan. But Illinois Indiana Sea Grant is just one of 34 state Sea Grant programs from across the country. And as our name reflects, we are a bi-state program. So we are housed jointly by the University of Illinois and Purdue University. So part of our national Sea Grant mission is workforce development. So preparing and encouraging the next generation to enter this career field, which is why we are here today. So this morning, we have 5 lovely colleagues from various aspects of the natural resources field who have kindly agreed to speak with you all and share some insights into their various professions. So before I pass things off to Megan, I just wanted to note that if you have any questions for our panelists, please type them in the chat. Carolyn is overseeing that. Or if you'd prefer, go ahead and raise your hand. And that's just in the React button in the toolbar at the bottom to raise your hand and we can call on you to just ask your question verbally. So with that, I will hand it off to Megan.
Shelby, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Shelby Brunner. Oh, Brooke, we hear you now. Good news, but I will keep going. So I am the Science and Observations Manager for the Great Lakes Observing System. If you've heard of us, great, you know what we do. We are a data aggregator. If you haven't, we are sort of similar to Sea Grant in that we get all of our funding from NOAA, our parent organization, and we are charged with aggregating data in real time, so it's useful to people in the region for decision making. So if you go to seagull, like the bird.gloss.org, you can see any real-time assets that are aggregated through our organization and share the data free of charge for people to use. My job as the Science and Observations Manager is to coordinate with all the people who deploy the buoys, who might be deploying assets, and to think about new science initiatives so we can connect the data and make it go as far as possible. I get to coordinate with researchers, scientists, and technicians from across the region, including a couple of colleagues on the panel with me and a couple of our hosts. So it's a really great position. And I'm trying to do some national level work as well with with our Salty Coast colleagues, as it were.
Awesome. Thank you. We will go back to Brooke.
Okay, can we hear me this time? Cool. Sorry about that. I found a new button on my headphones that I had bumped. So I'm Brooke. I am the outreach coordinator for Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District. A lot of people aren't familiar with conservation districts, but we were mostly all formed kind of around the Dust Bowl era, and conservation districts exist across the United States. So look and see if you have one in your area. We all kind of do different things. Conservation districts are, at least in Oregon, we are not county government, but we operate at the county level. So even within the state of Oregon, we are quite varied across the range. My day-to-day job, as the outreach coordinator, my job is to kind of make sure people know we exist and what we do. So I make flyers, I go to events like the farmers markets throughout the county and other kind of community events, and try to tell people who we are and what we do and how we can help them with their conservation goals for their property. We are also our government, but we're completely non-regulatory. So we try to really emphasize we're like not here to get anyone in trouble, because a lot of people hear government agency and they're like, oh, this is just somebody who's going to come out and tell me what I'm doing wrong and give me a bunch of fines, and they're not interested. So we try to emphasize that aspect of things too. But as the outreach coordinator, that's kind of my job, is to help figure out how to spread that message that we're here just to help, not to get anybody in trouble, and hear all the things that we do that can be helpful. So I think that's a semi-decent summary of part of it.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Brooke. And then next on my screen is Omar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Omar Gates, climatologist with GLISA, the NOAA Great Lakes Climate Adaptation Partnership, where we work in all 8 Great Lakes states, so from Minnesota all the way to New York. And for my role, I'm primarily a data person looking at observations and projections, or climate projections, so to speak, in the Great Lakes region. Another role that I have is also being tribal liaison, where I work with tribal nations and tribal organizations throughout the region in order to help them with their adaptation practices as they adapt to a changing climate. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Omar. Next is Karen.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Murchie, and I'm the Director of Freshwater Research at Shedd Aquarium, which is in Chicago in Illinois. It is a public aquarium, and we're going to be turning 100 in 2030. Fun fact, one of the oldest public aquariums. Anyway, what I do at Shedd Aquarium as a director of freshwater research, one of the things that's kind of unique about Shedd is the fact that we have a research team, both a freshwater side and marine. That's not too common overall, but so on the freshwater research team, I run our migratory fishes program, which is focused in the Great Lakes. And then we also have other researchers focused on urban freshwater, freshwater mussels, as well as wetlands and amphibians. So basically overseeing the team, assisting with their projects, budgets, etc. But then again, focused on migratory fishes, lake suckers, and the Great Lakes. So it's a cool job, and I look forward to telling you more about it. Thanks again for having me as well.
Thank you, Karen. And then last but not least, Sam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Guffey, and I'm working in the private sector as an environmental consultant. So I work right now for a business named ASTI Environmental, where I'm an ecological project manager. And most of my work focuses on wetlands, streams, rivers, lakes, and oceans. And the purpose of my work is to help people and businesses or other organizations understand what the natural resources are at a particular location, and understand what would be what are the impacts of their actions or their proposed actions, and help them comply with laws that are in place to protect those natural resources. And as a project manager, the management part is mostly it's securing contracts to take on new projects, supervising our people, and directing the work on individual projects.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. And I will send it over to Kristin.
All right. So again, everyone feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand. But in the meantime, we have another question for the whole panel. What special knowledge or skills are required for your job? So we'll go backwards, what we just did. So Sam, why don't you go ahead and kick off with that question?
Okay. So special knowledge and skills. One thing that is high in demand is knowing how to identify a wetland, especially where its boundary is. That's called wetland delineation. It's more of a technical skill, but it's needed very often for anyone who wants to work on the land. Also, other skills on streams, identifying the morphological characteristics of streams, knowing the organisms, so being able to identify the species of plants and fishes. And yeah, those are some field skills that get used a lot. And in terms of report writing, I would actually say that a lot can be learned on the job, like about the laws and how they're implemented, regulations, how environmental impact assessment is done. That can be learned on the job.
Thanks, Sam. Karen.
So from the research perspective, knowledge and skills, I guess, depending on what discipline you're in, being an expert in that area. For me, I've done migratory fish work for more than 25 years now, which is already kind of crazy. So just whatever discipline you're interested in researching, you can have a variety of tools in your toolbox. For me, as a migratory fish biologist, being able to have tools that allow me to track where animals go. So being able to put tags or sensors in or on animals and use that information to figure out how much of an area they live in. Do they make seasonal migrations? Things like that. And then of course, our other biologists would have different skill sets from knowing how to work and doing genetic analysis and other types of things. I think as far as that practical knowledge, being able to take really good notes, being very curious about the environment, and interest in collaborating is also pretty important as well. Lots of things that you learn in school, but more importantly, things that you learn if you're doing a graduate degree and have a project that you have to really oversee from beginning to end. Thinking really critically about what questions are relevant, making sure you're not duplicating studies that have been done before. But also, I think more importantly, now coming up with an applied angle, how does what you're learning about relate to fisheries managers or, from a conservation perspective? I think those are all really important aspects. Yeah, and of course, when it comes to analyzing data, having statistical knowledge, and just being able to write a paper from beginning to end and get it out for publication. There's additional things that are needed for working at Shed in terms of being ready to speak with media and engage learners from young age to adults. But we might get into that later. So
Great. Thanks, Karen. Omar?
Yeah, so when it comes to like my field, it's primarily climate change, but with my role as being a climatologist, I'm technically an applied climate scientist. So I'm taking like all the knowledge you see in like research papers, findings from colleagues from within the field, and being able to synthesize that information into information that can be used by others, whether it's from a city manager to a tribal representative or to even a student. It just varies. So with those special skills, one of the most important for my field is communication. Just being able to understand what your audience is and how do you speak to them in order so that you convey that information correctly is the most important part. Because many people are aware of climate change and aware of the changes that we're seeing within our weather and climate. But if you need to apply that to certain situations, most audiences aren't going to understand what atmospheric rivers are or this, that, and the other. But if you put into a context that they're saying like, oh, you'll see more rain, you'll see more precipitation, then you can start connecting the dots. In terms of technical skills, there's a lot of science background, whether it's like learning about calculus, statistics, all of that nature. Now, with my background, I have a background in meteorology and atmospheric science, but there are other avenues to become a climatologist or a climate scientist as well. So it's not just a one size fits all. When it comes to just having that perspective of relationship building, that's another important thing because with my role, I'm working with different various partners, and it's not just one size fits all where I'm just working with only one group. Again, working from students all the way up to elected officials, sky's the limit. But yeah, that's just some of the things that come to mind.
All right, thanks. Okay, Brooke.
Yeah, I'll echo some of Karen and communication is a huge part of what I do. Figuring out what the messaging is around a certain topic, like how do we want to approach the idea of integrated pest management with this one particular section of the agricultural community in our county. figuring out how to meet people where they're at and bring them something new to think about, and figuring out how to manage all of that with all of the different groups, all of the different players is definitely a huge skill in my job. I think one skill that I wish I had a little bit more of and that I'm continuing to work on through this job, I've only been in my role for about a year, is graphic design. Using Photoshop and InDesign and tools like that, I'm improving, but that's a huge skill that I use a lot that I'm kind of learning on the ground, which isn't a bad thing, but that's something that potentially if I had had the opportunity to take a class or something through school, that would have been helpful for me in my current role. Other than that, yeah, I don't know. I'll just keep it brief and keep it to that for now, because I think we've covered the science communication aspect of it pretty well.
Thanks. And Shelby.
Yeah, I will echo what some of my co-panelists said, and that having some really good technical knowledge, specifically for my role, it's around sensors and different types of observing platforms that can be out in the wild and collect data, and understanding how those sensors work and what their limitations are, as well as what sort of data makes sense or if it's viable. So being able to do some like spot checks and communicate with the technicians on what they're putting out so you can adequately translate what they're deploying on their end to what needs to be displayed for public and use both immediately and after the fact is important. I heard a lot of project management, and I will echo that, and I will add that project management really ends up being people management in a lot of cases. So having strong interpersonal skills and being able to watch the different pieces and figure out how you can help bring those together and move things forward is pretty key in my role, and a part of it I really enjoy. And then something that Omar said I think made sense as well, and I want to echo it, is having a background in science is really useful, and then also being able to communicate and translate that. So whether it's connecting two researchers from Duluth, Minnesota and Buffalo, New York to figure out how their projects are very separate, but like how they share common goals so you can develop a project, or if it's translating information for public use or use by officials, how do you balance that and sort of as the intermediary of information?
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I will pass it back to Megan.
Thank you. And Jenna is one of our interns and has her hand raised. Jenna, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, my question is for Omar, and I was wondering if you have ever worked on a project that completely changed based on community feedback or input.
Definitely. And I believe that's like majority of my projects because when I go into a project, just my thought process of it is think of it as a two-way communication or a two-way street in which I provide information or ask them what are their needs. And then from there, be able to get that feedback from them saying like, okay, yes, the data is nice, but can you frame it in this type of respect? Or can you like give us this type of product that can be helpful for our mission or for our representatives that will be helpful for us in the long run. And of course, like it always changes on the fly. So you have to be flexible and be able to like go with the flow, so to speak, in order to just like gauge what is needed. And then from there, be able to adjust as accordingly. So with that, hopefully I answered your question, but like if there are any things, like let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question is for anybody, and Brooke kind of touched on it. But were there any skills that you all needed for your job your current roles, that you didn't expect to need? I love all the thinking faces.
I'll jump back in, I guess, with that one. I did kind of touch on it, and I'll say my background is much more in research and the technical side than it is with outreach. but I kind of decided to pivot my career. So I sort of knew when I was doing that, when I was deciding to change my direction a little bit, that I was going to want more of those kinds of skills. I just hadn't had a chance to, there was no interim really opportunity to build those skills. It was just kind of like, okay, I was going this way, but now I'm going to go this way. So I'll just figure it out as I go. And I will say I'm really lucky that I have a very supportive boss and team here. So my skill development is, they knew that kind of when they were hiring me, that would be part of what was happening in this role. So yeah, hopefully that killed enough time for other people to think of answers.
Yeah, I've got two things. One is a science skill, and one's a people skill that I didn't expect. So I've always been working with water, fish, oceanography. I've never really been into plants, but it turns out that they're really important. It's very helpful to know what the plants are, to identify them and kind of understand how they function. Um, so dendrology will actually come in handy a lot. The second, the people skill, negotiation is used a lot. I'm working with clients. We have to negotiate how can we work together? What can we put into the contract fine print before we all sign it? I'm also working with regulators, negotiating, what can we do on this project site? Can we get this close to the river? What can we do that's going to be acceptable mitigation or restoration for any resource impacts? Because it's not at all clear what you can and can't do at each particular project.
I have a few things to add as well, if that's okay. So for me, so GLOSS is a small nonprofit, and one thing to consider when you're looking for jobs or companies is the size. I think that people will always leave and there'll be new roles to take on, but the size of the company, I think, dictates how much of new roles and positions you could learn or have to absorb into yours while they're backfilling a position. So as a company of previously 10 and now 8, there's a lot of space to fill. And one thing that I've been doing a lot more of is congressional messaging. And I never, ever thought I would be emailing members of Congress or making a case for that. But it's a really important piece. And especially in the environmental field, there's a lot of federal dollars that flow into the space. And I think that's something to be aware of if you're thinking about the sciences. How do you message and make the case to the folks who control the taxpayer dollars that your work benefits the general public? So we do a lot of that, and I've gained a lot of skills in that.
Maybe one last thing to add from like a research perspective too is that there's always new skills to learn for every field. That's something that I think you should probably expect, and it's an exciting thing that that you're constantly learning new ways of analyzing data. I think maybe one other piece that I'll add too is that in my position as director, the people management skills is new. That's not something I took. Getting a degree in biology and then doing graduate school. It's something that takes work. You're always finessing, the skills, and it's lifelong learning. So.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question from one of our interns, Claire. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, yeah, I'm Claire, and I study natural resources and environmental science. Throughout my undergrad, I've had more of like a science and more of a research focus, but now I'm thinking about transitioning to a more social science and outreach focus. So I have a question for you, Brooke. Besides just learning more about graphic design and having a supportive team, what were some resources that were helpful in that transition? And what prompted you to switch from more research to more of an outreach focus?
Kind of two really good questions there. So One resource that I would point you to for sure would be NAI, the National Association for Interpretation. They're about like natural resources interpretation and historical site interpretation, not like language, which is a question I get every time I bring that up. But that's another thing that I had no idea they existed until I started here, and my boss was like, hey, you should join this. And I did, and it's been really great. They have a conference every year that if you can get some support from your university to go to, that is a really good resource to network with people. And even if you don't go to the conference, they have forums on their website, and they have a ton of webinars that are really valuable. So check those out. There's also more specific places like the Xerxes Society has some webinars, and they always record them and put them on their YouTube channel. So they have some good ones about like how to do science communication about creepy crawly animals that people don't like, and stuff like that. So I would just look out for a lot of those kinds of resources to help kind of build that skill set of how to talk to people about different things. And then your second question, kind of how and why did I decide to pivot from research? Part of it, I got burned out, in all honesty. I went straight from a master's into a PhD program, and I started a PhD in the fall of 2020, which, if anyone remembers, was a really interesting time to move to a brand new place and start a brand new thing. And yeah, I just got burned out on research. I was working way more than I was being paid for, which is kind of part of how grad school works a lot of the time, but it eventually just kind of exhausted me, and I didn't want to leave the field entirely. I didn't want to leave science and research completely, but I wanted to kind of do something where I was a little bit more in the community and talking to people and helping with a little more of the communication aspect, and also just the like on the ground part, rather than how it felt through a lot of my grad research was like, I'm collecting all this data, I'm doing all of this, and then it just sits on a shelf and doesn't go anywhere. And I wanted to get into the part of like making it go somewhere. So that was part of why I pivoted, and how it was honestly kind of challenging. I applied to about 75 jobs and ended up with 2 offers, one of which was a federal position that I'm really glad that I didn't take, given how all of that has shaken out over the last year. And the other one was this one, which I'm really, really glad that I did take. So yeah, it can be challenging to make that shift, but luckily you're at the beginning of your career, so you still have time to figure all those things out, and develop more of those skills to be more competitive across a variety of different places, rather than just kind of being in a lane and then trying to switch lanes. You're still just on more of an open road than where I was at in my career when I made the switch. So you're in a better position than I was. Don't let my massive pile of rejected job applications scare you too much.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat that is similar. So it's, I've got social science training, but am interested in doing ecologically and environmentally oriented work. What sorts of work could I do as somebody with training in environmental sociology? How do neighborhood plants impact people and communities, but not ecology? So does anyone want to offer some resources for flipping the other way, essentially?
Yeah, I can start. So somebody with this type of background could definitely work in community planning. Most municipalities or counties will have one or more staff who work on planning out, how is their community going to grow? How is it going to remain resilient in the face of climate change, sea level rise, other issues that are affecting their community or will be in the future. And there also is a lot of private consulting to help people who have that sort of a mission. So for planning out how to manage the trees in the city, or many, many different aspects of sustainability, could be suitable for someone like that type of background.
I was just going to add that having sort of that interdisciplinary interest is really useful. So much about conservation is about people. So having that social science background and an interest in ecology is really relevant. Been working with some collaborators on human dimensions study that they had funding for, looking at, people fishing around the Great Lakes who's using it to put food on their table. And that's really, a social science question with the interface of, fish. So I think there's tons of opportunities, and beyond what Sam said too, I think a lot of NGOs are working in that sphere of looking at ways of, bringing back, parks and waterways that can benefit nature and the people that live in those areas. I can even think of, park districts too as another opportunity that are working on both the ecology, but also the social science side of things.
Great, thank you all. Looks like we have another question in the chat. So this is a general question for any or all of the panelists. Looking back from the point you're at now, what types or programs of postgraduate education are most valuable for your careers? Alternatively, would you regard entry-level positions right out of college as a better method of getting your foot in the door to this industry? Shelby, are you about to answer it?
Yeah. So thanks for that question, John. For me personally, I was really fortunate and did two different fellowships, one when I was in my bachelor's program and then one when I was finishing my graduate degree. And both sort of both shifted my trajectory pretty significantly. One was the Hollings Fellowship. So if you're early on in your bachelor's degree and you're interested in applied oceans and Great Lakes research similar to what Sea Grant supports, I would highly suggest looking at the Hollings Fellowship. And NOAA has a number of different fellowships that I think are really great because they help you at least see what an agency role looks like or what agency work can be, and then decide, right? I think at least for when I was finishing my PhD, there was a lot of you should go into academia and do a postdoc, but like there are other routes to explore. And I think we've all sort of made it into different routes, but that's not a natural path when the professors that you're working with want, they're trying to get you to do what they do because they love it and they are passionate about it, but that's not right for everyone. So doing the fellowships helped give me a different viewpoint from what I was seeing in my education process. And that was really crucial to getting me to where I am today. And for the entry-level jobs, I think it's important to consider where you want to be. And if you don't know what your trajectory is, an entry-level job is a great way to figure out if you like that space and then start a graduate degree. I wouldn't recommend diving straight into a graduate degree unless you feel super confident in what you want to do. I did it, and I can tell you it was maybe not the best call. It worked out, but it doesn't always for everyone. And so if you can find a job and figure out, it just helps you give time and it gives you experience, which can be really helpful in shaping your future career path.
Thanks. Omar, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just dovetailing off of that. One thing that came to mind, especially in terms of networking, is join professional societies. There are several different professional societies that have student-focused activities. For me, especially, there's the American Meteorological Society, or AMS, as well as the American Society for Adaptation Professionals, or ASAP for short. Those are two different organizations or two professional societies where you're actually interacting with professionals in the field. So it's a great way to get your name out there, be able to meet other professionals and get that insight of saying okay, what have you done or what was your pathway? Because as Shelby suggested, there are many pathways in order to get to certain positions. So by just having that opportunity to be out there and interact with different people from different backgrounds, it can help. And of course, those professional societies do have a student focus area if you are currently a student and you want to get your foot into the door.
I'll maybe add one quick thing before we move on to the next set of questions. I didn't have a linear path to where I am at the aquarium right now. I did my master's after my undergrad, loved it, was a great experience, and I worked for Federal Fisheries Agency. It wasn't a permanent position, so went from there to do environmental consulting. Also love that. It was a great experience doing work up in the subarctic and Arctic. Then I did my PhD, then I did a postdoc, then I was an assistant professor, and then I have this position at Shed. So I follow whatever path like you're on and just be confident it's the right thing. You don't know where, all the experiences that you have in every position, there's meaningful skills that are transferable, and you never know who you're going to meet along the way that's going to shape where you go next. I think it's just a really important message for young people, I think, is that there's not one way to go. Take opportunities that come up that bring you joy as well. I think that's another really important thing if you can. Um, that's what I wanted to add.
Awesome. Thank you. There was another question about, can you recommend any activities so this is a faculty advisor for the chemistry club at Governor State University. And he has connections with the biology club. So he's asking for any recommendations or any activities their club could do to inform students about careers in this area. I think for one would be this, by the way, the career panel. Brooke, go ahead.
For sure. Yeah, pointing your students to things like this as you find out about them, definitely. I think also, like, my conservation district, we have, this is a little unusual, but we own 9 properties around our county. And we have a volunteer base, and we will take student volunteer groups for different things at different times. So looking into volunteering opportunities to kind of get a foot in the door for some of your students to like see and do more. Like we potentially could have a group come out from one of our local universities to do trail maintenance, and then students get to kind of see what that looks like, or invasive species removal, or working in our native plant nursery for a day, like all of those kinds of things, just to kind of get like an idea of what some of those jobs could be, because all of those things that are done by volunteers, there's usually also some component of it where someone somewhere gets paid to do that part. So yeah, look for like group volunteer things you can plug into with those kinds of clubs, and I think that's a good way to get a little bit of experience and see a little bit of stuff.
If there's ever a chance to go to a conference, even that's marginally related to your subject area, if it's on your campus or somewhere that it's not too far that it's still accessible, you could learn so much by just taking a day or two and going to that conference. It doesn't matter if you don't understand most of the technical stuff, but listening to what people are working on and just talking with real people and chatting, you will learn so much about what real work is like.
I was going to offer something similar, but in the reverse, is if you have alumni from your university or just friends, inviting them to give just short 30-minute lunch talks. It's fun for them to come back, and I think it helps the students connect more with that path because they can see, like they were able to say, I was in your seat. Whereas I feel like, for someone from a very small town with very limited like opportunities, when I was finishing high school, it was crazy to think I might ever not live in my home county and never do the thing that like everyone else did. So I think talking to people who you have been in those shoes can be useful.
Thank you all. This next question is in the chat from Ariana, and it is for Sam. Within consulting, do you use any specific standards to evaluate the limits of building sites or conservation, such as LEED or BREEAM?
I don't have much to say because I don't personally know about that. I know that there are people who do that when you get into the architectural design and the landscape design phases, but I actually know next to nothing about those standards. There are standards for, since I'm focused on ecology, there are more often state or even local standards for a setback from a river or a wetland, or how much of the area you can touch before it gets into a question that needs to be answered by the federal government. Um, so there are a lot of different specific things, but I don't know about those particular ones. Sorry.
Thanks, Sam. And then Jenna, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so this question is gonna be for Sam. And I'm currently studying environmental engineering, and I'm interning with green infrastructure and MS4s, and kind of like learning how to explore connecting engineering back to the natural resources side and incorporating native infrastructure back into sustainable design. And I wanted to ask if you have ever had to defend your project's ecological goals against like pushback from clients or developers, and kind of how do you overcome that and advocate for what's right and what's your project is about.
Okay. Um, so there is a lot of work with green infrastructure and other types of nature-based solutions that people are pursuing nowadays. And I've actually been pleasantly surprised with the clients or developers, the people who want to do a project. The vast majority of them want to do it right, and they actually want to protect the natural resources. It's not like that the resource is an obstacle. Even once when I was out on this job, people were building an oil pipeline, and I expected those people to be kind of rough and just wanted to get the job done, but they actually cared and they didn't want to hurt this endangered species that was in the area, and they wanted to do things properly. So usually there's not that much you have to do to convince your own clients to do what's right for nature. That is sometimes comes into play, but uh, more often it's more like, well, usually the law is on your side, where you can just say, well, this law says that you can't build something there unless you get a permit from the government, and there's no way they're going to do that based on what I've seen the past few years. So then you can start that discussion of, well, if you can just clarify what your key goals are, maybe we can find a different way to do this.
All right. Thank you. We love all the questions, so appreciate that. So I think, and I probably have skipped one. There was one, again, similar to environmental consulting from Thomas. It was specifically for Karen because you had mentioned that you had environmental consulting experience. So he's just wondering what your experience environmental consulting was like.
Yeah, I had done a few beyond that permanent position for a while. I actually did some environmental consulting gigs between like my undergrad and master's, and even while I was doing my master's, getting some like part-time work here and there. Needed to work through undergrad and everything as well to support myself. So I got to do tons of cool things. First of all, some work on the St. Lawrence River, trying to understand American eels and how they would migrate out towards the Atlantic. This was in relation to a dam that was across the St. Lawrence. So yeah, tons of cool experiences. So there was that eel work, but then also while I was in school, I helped a smaller consulting firm with doing some stream assessments at places where there were road crossings and culverts were into play there. So doing some, velocity readings and things like that. And then for the work up in the subarctic and Arctic, I mean, that was really cool. I was doing a lot of work in very remote areas, being helicoptered into locations. And I think what was particularly interesting for me is it got me outside of my fisheries bubble, which had been my focus, and I was learning so much more. I was doing water quality, benthics, so not just the invertebrate, but the sediment sampling. My first time doing sampling for periphyton, which is the slime on the rocks. So I think that was helpful for me in so many ways, to get way more sampling and a better ecosystem understanding. Learned, how to use so many more tools. I learned how to be very resourceful in my planning. When you're out in remote areas, you can't just go to a store to replace something that's broken. I learned how to change spark plugs on a snowmobile, on a frozen lake. I learned how to drill through 6 feet of ice. Stuff like that wouldn't have been, other experiences I would have got in any other way.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll take another from chat and then we'll get to you, Ariana. So Anna is asking, and this is for everyone, from your experience, what job opportunities open up in the environmental management field, in research fields with an MS versus a PhD? So that's one question. And then are there any specific opportunities you would take advantage of in grad school if you could go back? So that's for anyone.
Well, I can jump in, I guess, real quick first. So I should clarify, I did not finish my PhD. I ended up taking a second master's instead of finishing it. So there's always that option with the grad school paths. However, when I was applying for jobs, including my current job, I was still planning on finishing my PhD. I was at the tail end of it, and was planning to start a new job and have some kind of overlap and get things wrapped up with the PhD, and it just didn't end up working out that way. But I got to a point in my job applications where I started referring to my PhD experience as being a lab manager, which I essentially was, but I stopped putting my PhD on applications because I felt like it was holding me back and getting me rejected out of applications faster, because it was starting to feel like there were things I was applying for that I was looking potentially overqualified for, or that employers were looking at someone with a PhD or with almost a PhD and thinking like, well, they don't really want this job. Like they're going to just take this job, be here for 6 months and then leave for something else. So I started taking it off my application at a certain point, or listing the experience in a way that was honest but different, I guess. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that, with my most recent experience on the job market.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you want a career in research, a PhD will be helpful. If you want a career in anything else, it's not going to be required unless you were looking for some highly specialized technical position. Even if you do want to contribute to research, you can do that with a master's. There are plenty of opportunities in government jobs and NGOs and academia where you can contribute, but as a master's level researcher, you won't be the one choosing what questions to pursue. If you want that to be your career, then that's when a PhD will really serve you.
That's a good summary, Sam. I think from my perspective, it's a two-way street for me. I have a PhD. I would say I haven't overly utilized it, and you will almost always hear me refer to myself as like, I have a graduate degree. I don't specify which graduate degree I have because I think sometimes it makes people like, oh, she thinks she's better than me. I had a lot of that experience when I was in Washington, D.C., where people who had PhDs would sort of use it like they were better than masters. And I think that's total garbage. I think you choose the degree that makes sense for you and you go forward. That's not the question, but that's my stance on it. I am happy I have a PhD though, because it does give me weight when I need it. But I agree, if you want to ask the research questions and think about where the directions can go, then it's really useful. And it is nice to be able to like say that you've done the work and have that degree. But at the end of the day, if you are a good researcher with a master's degree, you will get, people will still respect you because you have the skills and the ability, and being able to back up what you want to do makes a big difference. But I know for like getting into roles, that difference can be important, and sort of like the finesse. That maybe wasn't very useful. Sorry.
Thank you. That was helpful. All right, I'll pass it on to Megan.
Yes, this is a fantastic discussion, and the comments the questions coming in through the chat are awesome. So if you have a chance to look at some of those, that would be great. I will go to Ariana next to ask their question.
So, hi, I am currently doing research at Northwestern University, and I am planning workshops with my team to educate high schoolers on photosynthesis and a photosynthesis sensor that we've been working on at the Chicago Botanic Garden. And I was wondering if you guys have any advice on how to help formulate that education for younger students, because it can be very like complex information for them to take in a 3 to 4 hour workshop. So I was wondering if you guys have any experience with that, and how how you guys dealt with teaching younger people about your like specification.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just jump in there. Yeah, one of the things I would suggest is have like interactive activities for them to do throughout the engagement, whether it's them walking around the gardens or just trying to like take observations and like take notes of what they're looking at. Another thing that's been helpful, especially when I go into classrooms and speak about climate change, it's not the most enticing thing for a high schooler to think about, but most of the time it's just having that discussion and just having, again, that two-way communication of like, what do you understand? And from there, that helps me be able to like frame the discussion and saying like, okay, they are seeing like more water in their backyard, or they're seeing like it's hotter during a summer day than usual. Why is that? And just having that sense of like curiosity within them to like say, okay, what am I seeing? Like, can I explain what I'm seeing? And then from there, what can come out of that conversation that can help you as a facilitator be able to get on to the next step? So one, more interactions or more activities where they can have hands-on sense, and then two, just having a discussion rather than a lecture.
And Ariana, I'll add that this is the perfect place to add it because you have some Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant educators on the call who do this as part of their work as well, and they're very local to you. So not to volunteer you all, this is for us. But
I already wrote it down.
Yes, please feel free to reach out to us, because that's what our education team does. We take the science that the researchers are doing and we take it into the classrooms, so that students can understand it better. And just my small little tangent is I echo everything that Omar said. You just have to get their hands wet and their feet dirty, because that's the way they're going to understand it better. It's not always with the language that we use, because they don't always understand the jargon that comes in the science world. But thank you for that great question. And then I will also send it to Andrew, who has a question.
All right, thank you. So I'm currently a strategic communications and biology student, and I'm looking at out of college, kind of looking at an outreach or science communications role in the environmental sector. And I was wondering, in terms of what employers value more in undergraduates, do you think a strong general communications portfolio would be preferred over having like a familiarity with the hard science and research? Or what should we kind of keep in mind to invest our time into developing?
I think that's going to be very, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, Brooke.
I'll try to keep it quick because I know we're running out of time. I think that's going to vary a ton by each employer. I think bigger companies or bigger nonprofits or just bigger groups where they have like an entire dedicated team of like they have a whole communications department. They might be like that. I would expect they'd be looking for more of the communication skills and the interpersonal skills, strategic, all of that part of it. I think they'd be looking more. And I think when you're in a smaller place, like my conservation district, we have 10 full-time employees. I'm the only outreach person on staff. We don't have a whole team of us. So for my role, I think having some of the technical background and some of the communications is important. But yeah, I think it's going to vary a lot by who you're applying for a job with, what you want to emphasize on your application. And I think when you're at the undergrad and early career stage, it can be about what you emphasize on your applications, on your resume, and in your cover letter, rather than like I wouldn't limit yourself in undergrad to only focusing on like this half of your degree or this part of your degree. I would get as much experience in both aspects as you can, and then just kind of wiggle back and forth between what you emphasize on your applications.
Thank you, Brooke. And we are about at time right now. There have been amazing questions and a lot in the chat. I just want to say that we are very grateful for all of our panelists to come and join us today. And for you all, the audience, for taking an hour out of your day to come and just learn more about what our professionals are doing. I do have my one last thing is, if there is one word that you all could share about what you love about your job. If you can just describe it in one word, that would be fantastic. And as you all are thinking about what this one word might be, Carolyn is going to put a link in the chat. If you all could fill out just a quick survey, we want to know if this was beneficial for you, what you learned from it, so that we're always trying to improve. So we want to just a quick 2-second survey would be great if you all could fill that out. But yes, if you all could share just one quick word about what you love about what you do, I will mute myself and let you go.
Exploring.
Diversity.
The people.
Experiences.
Variety.
Awesome. Those are very impactful words, and I appreciate you all sharing them with us. Thank you for your time today. We are going to send this recording out to everybody, so that if there's anything else that you want to go back and hear again, you have that option. And I will see if we can share our panelists' emails with you all, so that you can ask them some of these questions that we weren't able to get to in the chat today. But thank you all. Have a good rest of your Thursday, a good rest of your weekend, and good luck with all of your adventures.